Remedies from human sources. You know, there's the perennial question. Is there a purpose behind our existence? Is there meaning? Can we live without meaning and purpose? Probably not. So we're going to have to invent a purpose and a meaning, even if there isn't one, just to carry on. That's what I reckon. So these questions and many more are the subject of this inquiry. Can I ask you if that's better? Yes. Humans are the most successful animals, being top predators that kill for food as well as to secure privacy of position. Although other ways of being are accessible to us, and may be the custom of those who practice harmlessness, violent movies and gaming console images of Homo sapiens, are we Homo sapiens? Indicate that an often lower than basic ancestral drive is uppermost in our culture. How we play and entertain ourselves, how we present to our children, is indicative of where we're at. From this evidence, and indeed from the source of many movies and computer consoles, being an endless succession of crimes and wars down through the ages, it's obvious that humans are capable of doing almost anything to survive, for revenge, and to achieve and maintain top position. Image is a bit small, isn't it? It's Kill Bill. And the most interesting thing in this image, I think, is that, which says, kill in love. Human survival capability, which is linked to mental development, boils down to learning skills at multiple levels that are then absorbed in the collective psyche. These capabilities are also communicated within our culture as stories, philosophy, science, art, and artifacts. In our postmodern era, as we face yet more social unrest, political instability, and currently the aftermath of economic meltdown, a number of commentators amongst us seem to be increasingly committed to chaos theory, where the unexpected is seen to drive outcomes. Will this become incorporated into our modern mythology? Can we live according to it? Different races have their own myths, and include those that are echoes of their collective past, when distant ancestors began to differentiate as humans. Retaining a myth of genesis of their gods and beliefs, as Joseph Campbell has so eloquently described, helps to ensure social integrity and psychic stability. The argument goes that should humans lose this thread to their past, then their ability to hang on in times of uncertainty and change, when the forces of chaos are uppermost, may be compromised. Of course, change is epitomized by uncertainty and chaos theory. It's necessary grist for the evolutionary mill, where successful adaptations to an altering environment provides the cutting edge for survival. In terms of the psyche, the same is true. But the new adaptation, in order to integrate, must relate to the older form. Without this capacity for integration, social cohesion is lost, action becoming based upon purely selfish survival drives. This seems to be evidenced today, where, as suggested in the paragraph before, many social conventions are on a landslide into chaos. As this occurs, we may become increasingly pushed from acting out of basic animalistic instincts, where dog eats dog. Again, this image is not very big, but there's something immensely touching in this image, it seems to me. Just look at the boy in the foreground. And then he's hung with hand grenades and machinery of war. That which makes us unique within our animal family is our enhanced capacity for investigation for finding solutions to problems, inventing things, and folding our consciousness back upon itself to reflect upon our inner nature, finding the source there, and then recognizing this reflection in outer nature. This gives us a power with which to exercise our human responsibility and to change the course of our future. But humans are often caught between personal creativity, the experimental wild side, where chaos above order may hold sway, and the dictates of society's moral codes that may inhabit this thrust for self-expression. Carl Gustav Jung understood that psychotherapy had emerged in the late 19th century because religious systems had begun to fail. He believed that human beings cannot live with meaningless in their life. Religious traditions provide frameworks within which meaning can be approached in an experiential and practical manner. Jung wrote, "The Christ symbol is of the greatest importance for psychology insofar as it is perhaps the most highly developed and differentiated symbol of the self, apart from the figure of the Buddha." He explained that Christ and the Buddha had both experienced their confrontations with the unconscious. The temptations of Jesus, of course, and the Mara period in the Buddha's story. They are experiences that individuals should not seek to imitate, but might expect to follow. What I've alluded to so far is a ragbag of social and ontological dilemmas to which no glib solution can be offered. However, our understanding of human themes and spiritual themes may be enhanced through an examination of a few human-sourced remedies that have been proved recently. Lac humanum, the AIDS nosode, Mother Mirror, placenta humanum, and our old friend carcinosin. And of course there are many more, especially matrodonal remedies, that I could have included, but this is quite enough for us to digest. So I'm just going to run through them in précis form, so we can get an idea of what the common ground is. So first, let's take a look at Lac humanum. To begin our journey of discovery of human themes, let us review the key psychological issues that arose during the many provings and subsequent cures all over the world with various mother milk potencies carried out by Rajan Sankaran and Divya Shabra. Another excellent proving has been carried out by Patricia Hatherley with similar results. However, for brevity's sake, I will focus upon the former provings. The main concept concerns the evolution of ego, that of the baby weaning and gradually developing a distinct I as a separate consciousness. This develops into a dipole of selfishness, I want, and altruism, I give, and eventually gives rise to the perennial question, am I here for my own satisfaction doing what I like to do, versus am I in relationship with others, guiding my actions according to their needs? The vector of selfishness leads to outsider feelings of detachment, even alienation, while the vector of altruism may lead to feelings typical of remedies from animal sources of failure with self-loathing and revulsion. There are predominant sensations of disconnection, detachment, and spaciness as in a drug-like state. The compensation that may develop is of an iron self-control and also of taking on many duties of care, rather like carcinosis. Divya Shabra has spoken about Lac humanum thus. Primarily, there's a theme of being helpful to others so that you receive acceptance and are not alone. The I needs to be sacrificed for the good of the we. It's necessary to do things for others, obey the rules, and be sensitive to the opinions of others, but unfortunately, this also leads to feelings of being forced, treated like rubbish, and ridiculed. The issue of having two wills is central to Lac humanum. There is conflict between having both a spiritual and a non-spiritual nature, a desire to work and a desire to go on holiday, a desire to be an individual and yet part of a group. There is a lot of emphasis on one's relatives and on being helpful to one's family and friends, community, and those less fortunate, what we might call humanitarian service. Key concept, the individual, the unique I, versus belonging to the group, its beliefs and morals. Do we recognize ourselves in here? I guess almost every human being would say, yeah, there's something of this in me. This obviously doesn't mean that we all need this remedy. It would, of course, have to be an absolute key feature of the case in order to make the prescription. And carcinosin. Cancerous tumours are characterized by an overabundant proliferation of cells of one type. Cancer cells are regressive, having reverted to a less differentiated state than normal cells. Within the tumour, each cell conforms to its neighbour like bricks in a wall. However, from the point of view of the organism as a whole, the cells are rebellious and unruly. There is an escalating struggle between the body, which wishes to maintain its integrity and proper functioning, and the tumour, which subverts. A scanning electron microscope view, as you can recognize, of tumour cells. Cancer cells are like a monoculture. In a healthy organism, groups of differing cells cooperate together, while in cancerous tissue, the conformity of structure within the tumour allows no functional interfacing with surrounding tissues. Although it is genetically conforming and can therefore bypass normal immune defense strategies, it's foreign, rebellious. Carcinosin types are famed for their sympathetic nature and strong desire to please, to keep everyone happy. Of course, this is an impossible task. Frequently, their delusions of failure and dreams of endless striving, for instance, of flunking exams or of looking for someone and not finding them. These dreams may utterly exhaust them. There is reflected in cancer patients common feelings that the task of getting better is too great for them. However, they strive on, accepting hideous treatments to stay alive, often for the sake of loved ones. Carcinosin types may have dreams of having to count every grain of sand on a beach, or sit an endless run of examinations. At a societal level, the polarity of conformity and rebellion is fundamental to our ability to survive. Aspects of this predate the evolution of humans. In the animal kingdom, where it's vital for survival that prey and predator recognize one another, the method of recognition is analogous to the principle of conformity and rebellion. This is the principle of symmetry and asymmetry. A predator notes its prey and the prey notes the predator by a break in symmetry caused by the presence of an unexpected element in the environment. Just imagine that you're a lion surveying the savannah, looking for some unexpected element in what would normally be an uninterrupted view. It could be a tree, it could be prey. If it's prey, it's moving, so the asymmetry is there and changing. But of course, some animals have developed clever strategies, like the zebra. Does the predator see one or many zebra? And if it sees many, it won't know which to attack, will it? The immune system is on the lookout for an invading organism. Sometimes that does not belong, something that does not belong, asymmetry. It fails to notice cancer cells because they're too similar to normal cells, symmetry. In health, cancer cells are created and eliminated continuously in an interplay of catabolic and anabolic forces. In a healthy ecology, as in a healthy body, a balance is kept between the number of predators and prey, as between cancerous and non-cancerous cells. Symmetry evokes a sense of security, while asymmetry excites us because it's unexpected, perhaps even dangerous, like the relationship between predator and prey. Carcinosin and tuberculinum types are famed for their artistic talents. Carcinosin types in particular for their love of music and dancing. Art involves a dynamic interplay between symmetry, the known and safe element, and asymmetry, the dangerous element. Carcinosin typically expresses the pole of symmetry. Carcinosin types usually enjoy the more familiar and classical forms through which to express themselves. Traditional art woos us with a pleasant sense of security. Tuberculinum types are more typically expressive of the rebellious or asymmetrical pole. They enjoy the challenge of breaking the mold and creating a new form, such as revolutionary art. Carcinosin types have a keen sense of harmony, repetition, and pattern. If they're of the conforming type, they like everything to match and coordinate, as we may notice in their clothing or interior decor. A well-known characteristic is fastidiousness. Key concept for carcinosin: I must perfectly conform to the group's expectation. I must control myself, or I rebel. The rebellious aspect is most often seen in children patients who need carcinosis, isn't it? That can look quite like tuberculitis. Do you remember this ad campaign, the AIDS ad campaign? Chiseling out AIDS on the gravestone. That's what used not to happen. Everyone was so afraid of AIDS they wouldn't touch a patient that had AIDS, for fear of becoming contaminated. Do you remember that? AIDS results in a failure of the immune system, our last line of defense against morbific influences. The skin, the mucous membranes and organs such as the liver and gut act as the physical barrier. But when they are breached, the immune system is the final dynamic boundary. The breaching, or rather the failure of barriers and boundaries, is the central theme of the AIDS nosode. AIDS is transmitted via blood and usually sexually. Sex is about as close as our physical and emotional experience can get to dissolving the boundary that separates us from others. Because penetration is a voluntary or involuntary breach of our personal boundary. By definition, other venereal diseases like gonorrhea and syphilis spread through sexual intercourse and, like AIDS, thrive in situations of sex with multiple partners. However, AIDS is unlike these other diseases in that it breaches the integrity of the center of the cell, its nucleus, and its DNA. From the point of view of miasmatic analysis, tuberculosis and AIDS are similar. AIDS patients commonly succumb to tuberculosis. Certainly, both diseases are associated with youthful deaths. Our talented rebels, writers, and musicians are whisked away in the full bloom of their creative output. Both diseases represent a marriage of sora and syphilis. In the case of tuberculosis, typically a disease of migrants, the homeland sora has been wasted, syphilis. In the case of AIDS, the destruction of syphilis is of the personal boundary, sora. So here's a story of the AIDS nosode that arose out of the provings, and I've edited it down greatly so that we can have it in our short space of time. The story was written by Peter Fraser, our collaborator in the provings over many, many years. Actually, Peter had nothing to do with AIDS nosode proving, but he came in afterwards and said, I can see a pattern here, let me write it out. And he did brilliantly. The pathological action of HIV is to bring about a failure of the immune system, of our immune system. The feeling of having no boundaries between oneself and the world, of being vulnerable, naked and exposed, is therefore perhaps the most basic feeling of the nosode. So now the prover's words. I felt very exposed. I had no shell to protect me. Exquisite and precious mental pain. I had no shell for protection. The lack of a protective shell is truly painful, but that pain is exquisite and precious because it allows the possibility of connecting with people and the world and offers a release from isolation. There is a sense of connection or desire to connect in many ways with family, friends and partner, but also with nature and the divine. The opposite of this state is to detach from the world. Detachment is often expressed as a feeling of numbness. As at its most extreme, it becomes a feeling of paranoia that everyone is against them. Many of the provers experience dreams of houses, and particularly of large and ornate buildings. Not only were these dreams common, but they also were the things that struck most people about the proving. The combination of being so common and so striking indicates that such dreams are almost certainly a keynote of the remedy. Provers had a number of dreams in which safety inside the house was threatened by danger outside, and dreams of having to protect children were also very common. The most colourful and striking dreams of houses were of buildings that were grand or palatial and lavish. There were chandeliers, beautiful furniture, beautiful paintings, antique carpets, and there were railings, and you could just look down, and there was a great feeling of space. I dreamed I lived in a huge mansion with lots of beautiful antiques and artifacts. It was stuffed full of them. It looked encrusted. Every surface had beautiful things on it. Tables with collections of pretty handbags on them. It was chunky, solid furniture, but lovely. Collections of things everywhere. There was a huge marble staircase. I remember thinking, I do live in a lovely place. Often the houses had many stairs. The word that was most commonly used to describe this was lavish and ornate. The imagery of treasure in boxes and often buried also came up. Treasure can be a metaphor for all that is beautiful and desirable, but like all material things, it is of Hades' realm rather than the realm of spiritual life. When we die, all worldly chattels belong to Hades. Gems and precious metals are dug from deep in the earth and in time return to it. The archetypal treasure is the buried kind. Suddenly I came into a bright, bright light. The area was like a dome, of the kind you put over a clock. Light was coming through the windows at the top. There was a gold coffin, and it was at this point that I really became frightened and anxious. I didn't want to be in there. The light felt uncomfortable. The gold coffin in the middle of the room was encrusted with jewels. I climbed into it, pulled the lid down over me, and all these jewels and gold coins fell on top of me. There is in the remedy a dynamic between materialism and death, and the foregoing of material things, of a return to nature and to a spiritual world. This also is reflected in the house imagery, where the solid house becomes the natural teepee, or the South Sea island where housing is unnecessary. I felt I had to keep my feet on the ground. The only way to describe it would be a delusion, a tribal one. Everything felt natural, tribal, like the South Sea islands, barefoot, with flowers, with nature abounding, with white, green, and water. Just as the house is a metaphor for the physical body, so the physical symptoms are often found in places that have a relationship to parts of a house. There is in the remedy a sensitivity where the body and the environment interact, particularly the skin and the orifices, which, like the windows and doors of a house, are points of interaction between the interior and the exterior worlds. The skin, walls and roof is often sensitive, painful and dry. Almost all the orifices of the body, doors and windows, are affected with pain, dryness and sensitivity. The throat, which seems to be one of the most important physical representations of an opening into the body, is also affected. There would also seem to be difficulty in maintaining physical barriers, and a common manifestation of this is in hemorrhage. To sum up, the walls that protect also divide and separate. This results in feelings of isolation and detachment that culminate in feeling trapped. These dynamically contrast and alternate with feelings of connection to family, society, and to the divine. The most dynamic expression of the issues describes the feeling of losing your shell, your personal portable house. This causes painful vulnerability and exposure, but is also exquisite in allowing the possibility of connection. The key concept, the I and the other. The I being safety held within the group as a sister brotherhood versus I being disconnected and outcast. AIDS sufferers have been outcast, as indeed has the gay community. The relationship between the AIDS nosen and lac humanum is noteworthy. In Rajan Sankaran's proving of lac humanum, as in the AIDS proving, themes of houses, self-loathing and rejection came prominently into the foreground. Not unsurprisingly, milk and blood have features in common. Milk is derived from blood. As blood circulates through the body, it touches every cell, bringing to mind the AIDS noso theme of belonging and its opposite of feeling outcast. A key common theme of the AIDS noso and lac humanum is relationships, how we nurture and how we touch or don't touch. Part of the lac humanum idea is good mother, bad mother, partly because the mother's influence helps to socialize us. The AIDS idea is of that of blood brothers, good brother, bad brother. Inclusion and its opposite, being outcast. Blood brothers can be a group or tribe, like a gay community, or a religious brotherhood seeking to realize spiritual ideals. Like lac humanum types, many carcinosin adults have an unresolved question in their psyche. Am I for myself, not conforming, or am I for other people, conforming? Carcinosin is primarily about the price you pay for conformity, about being squashed into shape. Lac humanum is about the price you pay for individuality, isolation and alienation. This picture of lac humanum represents such a generalized conflict for so many that in order for it to be a prescribing feature, it must dominate every aspect of the case. In lac humanum, the central issue revolves around individuality versus conforming to the group, self-control versus helping others, going off and doing one's own thing versus staying at home and attending to family obligations. The opposite of lac humanum's individuality theme is universality. This, as has already been posited, is similar to the AIDS theme. I flow into you and you flow into me. The opposite of carcinosin's theme of conformity is, I shall not do what you want me to do. Get out of my space. The opposite of the AIDS theme of no barriers is, I'm completely separate from you. As lac humanum is about the price of individuality, carcinosin is primarily about the price of conformity, and AIDS is about the complete breakdown of defenses and barriers. The key concept of AIDS is chronic weakness of the boundary. The positive outcome is freedom to experience love, while the negative is feeling excluded, rejected, and isolated. I think I'm going to have to skip that slide because time is running out. I've got to give you a little bit on Mother Meera. She was a saint in the south of India. This is a picture of her. Near the end of her life, obviously. Here's her mission statement. I belong to no nation, no civilization, no society, no race, but to the divine. I obey no master, no rules, no law, no social convention, but the divine. To this I have surrendered all, will, life, and self. For this, I'm ready to give all my blood, drop by drop, if such is the divine's will, with complete joy. And nothing in this service can be sacrifice, for all is perfect delight. This statement by Mother speaks for itself. There have always been a very few humans who have pledged thus and lived thus. The opportunity to carry out a homeopathic proving derived from Mother's hair was irresistible for me. Of course, it's contentious to prove a human source. Indeed, Peter Fraser, my collaborator over so many years at the School of Homeopathy, backed out of this one. And I've held it back from publication too, not wishing to provide fuel for those who wish to deride and undermine the credibility of homeopathic practice. And now I'm really happy to put it out there, because I don't care. Well, I do care about where the knowledge takes us, and I don't care about our detractors. They can have fun if they want to with us. We'll continue doing what we're going to do anyway. So it was, there's some details. I'll skip that, just go on. At the onset of the proving, many experienced deep peace and inner serenity, simple happiness. Then some descended into a dark place from which there seemed no respite. I found that my belief structures fell away like autumn leaves. What I thought to be self-evident truths withered in a winter of despair. Occasionally, the briefest respite, like a bright ray, illuminated the path ahead, but most of the time I proceeded one step at a time, seemingly heading nowhere, except to view from a new angle my own human inadequacy and my smallness of being. Only when I'd surrendered all hope, become reconciled to a state of no certainty, no excitement, no purpose, then my reality shifted. Now I find myself resettled, as it were, in a most delightful place, where old troubles no longer hound me, and I have the capacity to be available for others more than before. For most of the time, I now feel that I've stepped out of my own way. I felt at one or connected many a time with myself and others. I had feelings of unconditional love, and once of being filled with white light, whilst a sensation of overwhelming love travelled up through my body and out of my head, a sensation I will never forget, a beautiful moment, followed by tears of pleasure and emotional pain, all at the same time. Feelings of calm and being detached, along with floating off, literally detaching, also occurred. It was an emotionally turbulent and physically demanding time, yet I sailed through it with an air of detached calmness, untouched by events around me. A strong feeling I had was like being a balloon and rising above it all, being untouched and out of reach from harm and discord, being a free spirit. For me, this polarity of detachment and heaviness is reflected well in the dream I had about floating away from the earth on a block of snow. I really wanted to stay on a block of snow and continue floating out into space, but I realized, just in time, that if I did, there'd be no returning. So I jumped off back down to earth and watched the snow floating away, further and further away. Letting go and being true to self and feeling deep connections were other major themes. I felt I cut the ties to situations and people who contained me and then redefined my role. I reasserted myself. This was never in an aggressive or angry way, but calmly and surely. I cried a lot during this proving, even in my sleep, and it was always a pleasant release. I felt lighter and calmer afterwards. I cried with pleasure too. Experiences that were emotionally intense could reduce me to tears. I don't usually cry. I had a dream in which I was holding a dagger, no handle, just a blade, which I wanted to push down my throat to pierce my heart to release the emotion. Physically, I was clenching my teeth, hands, everything. This sensation seemed to come to one point that was in the center of my forehead. This was where I was holding on, and it made me weep deeply. My awareness was that this emotion was coming from the place that I had resisted going to, because the sadness would be overwhelming. I was on my own, so I made a decision to go with the flow. I instinctively visualized the blade. This instinctive knowing in itself, I feel, is significant. I visualized putting it down my throat to my heart. What I experienced was an emotional wave. I was carried along by it. I had flashbacks, images of scenes from the past that I'd forgotten. They came and went in nanoseconds, and I was weeping without restraint. I felt a sensation of something coming up from the heart level. It was a kind of nausea, and this was followed by periods of numbness or paralysis. I couldn't move my tongue, from which I slowly recovered. Afterwards, I felt strangely light, physically and mentally. I was smiling, laughing. The strongest polarity was flow blockage, and this also expressed as connection and disconnection. There is a sense of connectedness that has stayed since the proving, albeit in a lesser degree, and it's slowly withdrawing, but it's still present. It is a sense of being somehow connected with the universe and all that is natural within it, a sense of being spoken to by nature, of being whispered to by trees, of messages and signs and sympathies exchanged, of understandings being forged, of links not visible to others being made and accepted. What the mother proving meant for many of us is simple. It put us in range of a perfected awareness, our smallness merging with universal being, and then left us, as it were, with our resistances, our doubts, our guilts, our impediments. Whatever could not be let go of and surrendered to, we experienced as pain. But a seed had grown that had a capacity to germinate in due course. Personally, I have no doubt that the proving experience has been a spiritual transmission from the universal spiritual mother as mirror, and offered an opportunity of a transformative journey through personal resistance to liberation. Now, there's something very similar in the placenta proving. I'm just going to go through this very quickly. I won't go through the proving because you can find it. It's documented. But through what Linda Willem said about the process of the proving itself. So on writing up the repertory section she wrote, it became apparent that what couldn't be seen was the process. This proving definitely reflected a journey of some kind for practically everybody involved in it. Within this journey, there seemed to be different stages. A great feeling of calmness, a feeling of indifference, a feeling of nostalgia. I'll just read this a little bit. This was very marked with provers looking back and taking account of who they were and what the meaning of their life had been. In particular, they were looking at their family relationships, both in the past and now in the present. The main journey, two parts, going with the flow and acknowledging the process. The second part, resisting the flow and having an intensification of symptoms. Recognition of self. This came more easily to those who put up the least resistance and happened much quicker. For those who resisted the journey, it was harder and longer, but nevertheless seemed as rewarding. So here's a picture that Alice Timmerman put up when she talked about this proving. That is about this flow from nostalgia to the journey to releasing into the flow and acknowledging the flow or resisting it. A number of provers felt a reawakening of original potential and purpose and a strengthening of what is personal and individual. This often involved lots of clearing out a lifetime's worth of junk, resolving old issues, curing of chronic problems, and feeling a great letting go and cutting of ties. Remarkably like the Mother Mirror proving. No accident, these are women remedies. So, a general summing up. That humanum theme. Am I a unique individual doing what I want to do? Or do I bow to the group, its beliefs and moral structures? The AIDS no-zone theme. Am I integrated into the sister brotherhood, or am I cast out? The carcinosin theme. I strongly conform to the group's expectations, I control myself, or I rebel. The mirror theme, the I and the group and all of nature are one in divine consciousness, or I feel disconnected. This then leads to a state that resembles the placenta theme. I go with the flow, remember and clear up old emotional clutter, or I feel disconnected, separated, and undervalued. That's very much placenta, of course, the undervalued organ, that's the afterbirth. We'll finish here. I have 2 minutes. I'll do my best. A common denominator amongst these remedies, a theme that binds them, is a mammalian issue. That of successfully adapting or failing to adapt to the dictates of the family and the group. If I cannot comply, I feel unworthy. The unique human element is that of self-observation and self-reflection, which leads to self-criticism, and the opposites mentioned above cannot be integrated, plus the capacity for reaching beyond the physical and sensual to integrate with the spiritual. This capacity allows humans to transcend their nature as mere carriers and creators of karma. Karma plays out as ignorance, anger, greed, pride, guilt, hatred, that in homeopathy have been codified by Hanuman as the primary miasms. These keep the wheels of sickness spinning, lifting miasmatic water to irrigate the roots of human suffering. When we're not present in the moment, this absence of presence leads to false perception. All suffering arises from this misconception. This could be described as the original Sora, Hanuman's mother of all diseases. So what can freedom from these distractions of presence mean, if not an integration of personal and collective experiences so that they're unified? Every mother is the provider of milk and of emotional nurturing for the infant. Through engendering feelings of safety, being bathed with the milk of human kindness, she provides the link to family that will later extend to the community. If this goes well, integration between the individual's ego and social dictates will occur. If not, then detachment and feelings of being an outcast may arise. This would seem to be the homeopathic message of Lakshmanam. Placenta humanum takes the rejection theme a bit further, suggesting a state of division after birth between the provider placenta and the beneficiary fetus. Hence, an abiding sense of loss may arise with nostalgia and profoundest feelings of being undervalued. The opposite state arose when the provers went with the flow, not resisting the obstacles that their unresolved past held for them. This latter state is, of course, reminiscent of the prelude of Mother Mirror. When all goes well, and egoic drives are harnessed to the collective, then awareness extends beyond the brother-sisterhood of humankind to include universal love. This would be the health-giving message of the AIDS episode. The unhealthy is, of course, the breakdown of barriers resulting in invasion and death. Back to love. When realized, this experience locates the experiencer within the experience. This is the message of Mother Mirror and the message of saints when and wherever they are encountered. Through the act of consciousness turning in upon itself, we become the eternal living in the now. This unity underlies the imaginary diversity that our sense perceptions and memories bring to us. By surrendering to this unity within and beyond the I, we realize our potential as co-creators of all possible and impossible realities. This is a purely human capacity. It could lead us through ignorance to a continuance It could lead us through ignorance to a continuance of suffering, or through enlightenment to contentment and peace. At the highest octave of awareness, all quandaries resulting from a previous non-unity of opposing forces can dissolve into an egoless state where there is space. Things just happen. Nothing is forced.